How did she do it? Do it. Do it. Do it.
Libby. Libby. Libby.
3, 2,
Libby.
1.
It's the Libby Show.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Libby Show. Today we have a very special guest. She's an author, podcaster, and entrepreneur, Mattie Jackson Selecman. Welcome to the Libby Show. How are you this morning?
Oh my gosh, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I am so excited to be talking about your new book, Lemons on Friday, which chronicles your journey through faith after the loss of your husband, Ben. I highlighted so many quotes out of this book, like 3 pages worth.
That's what you want. I'm glad to see that.
So many great quotes from this book. And I got to say, the first thing that I love about it is you address up front that this book is basically about facing those different types of loss in life, whether that be a husband or a family member. So I want to hear first off, is there something that you had in mind from the beginning of writing this book that you knew you wanted to include, that you wanted to hear when you were going through this journey from someone else?
I don't know if there was anything specific. I mean, I think it was sort of just the broad stroke of like hope in general. Because I think when we lose, especially so tragically and so suddenly, but when you suffer the loss of anything, you know, you're so caught up in dealing with the hole that that person or thing or whatever has left that sometimes it's just really easy to get bogged down in sort of the despair and the sorrow of it. And I just needed what I needed, especially early in that journey, was just constant reminders that like, this isn't going to be the end of my story. Like, this is a really dark right now chapter, but I needed people, you know, especially in my case, widows ahead of me to see their lives in a peaceful place again, you know, to like see them with some stability. And so I needed to see that in people ahead of me, and I needed to see it in scripture every day. And so I think what I just did was, by way of community and, you know, my faith, had to speak to myself, had to speak hope to myself when I didn't feel that hope yet. And so I think that's sort of my desire for the book, is that when people can't see hope in their own lives, like, I hope I can be that person or that reminder, you know, that they can go to this book and say, all right, I can get there. Like, it doesn't feel like it today, but I can see her slowly get there. And I know that that can be true for me too.
Absolutely. And as I was even reading through this book, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm getting like a pep talk on life right now. And, you know, there are times that I remember in my life, you know, in the past of losing something or feeling like, you know, when am I going to feel good? You know?
Yes.
And so there were a lot of quotes in this book that I thought, oh man, I wish I would have had that 2 years ago. But at the same time, I mean, you can't prepare what's ahead. So I felt like this is just a really great, timeless example of what it means to have hope on a daily basis. You mentioned about taking like small creative acts. And so you talk about this story of going to a pumpkin patch with one of your friends and leaving, you know, feeling at peace, that simple stillness. So can you share a little bit more about why you included that part about, you know, creating small acts of creativity in your life?
I'm so glad to hear you ask about that, because honestly, it was one of those where I was like, who's going to care that I went to pick pumpkins? Like, is this a stretch analogy here? But that was such a profound moment. I think I didn't realize the gravity of it even in that moment, but I knew after kind of being resistant to this idea, because I mean, grief is exhausting. Like, that's a lot of what I think made that task and what that kind of story represents is like things that would normally be quick or easy or fun or mundane or whatever just feel overwhelming when you're grieving, because you're, you know, mentally, emotionally, physically drained. So when I did decide, okay, this is the way that my friend is trying to be there for me, like, we'll just go, and came back and started physically arranging these pumpkins and like seeing beauty and using my hand and my mind and, you know, my imagination to try to make them look the best way they could. I really did have this moment of pause where I was just sort of taken aback and thought, you know, I haven't thought about my life for 10 minutes while I'm arranging these pumpkins, and I haven't felt heavy like I have for the last several months. Like I felt a lightness simply in doing this small little creative thing. And I think I realized in retrospect, it was that creativity breathes life into us. Like we know that. That's why we're meant to create. But also I think there was a moment where I felt I had a sense of control over something, like anything, even though it was just arranging pumpkins. And at that point, I truly felt like I had no control over anything in my life because I truly didn't. I couldn't control what happened to Ben. I had no idea what would happen in my future. And it was truly like a survival day-to-day, kind of situation. And so to have some control and to be able to create some beauty out of something, it felt so life-giving. And then from there, it was, I think I mentioned in the book, I hadn't cooked anything at all since he had died because thankfully people bring you food and it's the whole,
right.
That's always been an outlet for me. And it sort of sparked, okay, I bet cooking will help me on my really down days too. And it still does. And so that's why I think that's so important to me. And I hope, that looks different for everybody. Like some people it would be gardening, but like that would give me an anxiety attack. So it's just sort of the thing that breathes life into you. And even if it feels small, like the impact is really big when you're in a place of grief.
And you mentioned that up front, talking about how grief is different for every person. So I feel like, anyone reading this book is going to know, oh, okay, I can like sit back, take the flow of this book and not feel like I need to grieve a specific way like somebody else, which I think is going to give a lot of people just a sigh of relief in some way to know that they can take it day by day.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about just letting go and letting God take that burden of grief from you, and how like us as humans, we have a limitation to what we can do in our lives, but God is there to be like, hey, I've got this. You don't have to feel responsible for every single thing that happens in life. So what did it mean to you to look to God at that point and accept that he was just going to carry you through it and he didn't have to be the strong one all the time,
Yeah. I think at first it felt scary because I am a very, do-it-yourself person, and
same.
He made me very strong, and I really can handle a lot. And I think, at the beginning, you sort of mentioned a minute ago about wanting to do grief. I felt like I wanted to do it the right way, and that in retrospect isn't real. Like there's no right way, but I wanted to shoulder it, in a way that was honoring to him. And I wanted to be able to walk this path to hopefully inspire other people. But it took trying it my own way and having a lot of setbacks and failures and rough days to realize like, this is truly not something I can handle. And honestly, no one expected me or asked me to handle it on my own except myself. And so at that point, I say in there too, it's like, I thought that strength was my greatest tool in grieving and healing. And it turned out that surrender was the absolute greatest tool, because as we know Christ has that power. I mean, it's in scripture, when we're weak, he is strong. And it was a 24-hour choice that I had to make. And I remember getting that point and writing on a little like piece of paper, it may have been a Post-it note, and writing Jesus at the top in Sharpie, because I knew his strength and his ability was permanent. And then writing all the things that I wanted to control myself in pencil, because I knew that they weren't up to me, and the way that I was going to handle them, wasn't going to be what would really bring permanent healing. And I read off that list every morning. And some mornings I was like, yes, Jesus, you got this. Like, I trust you. And some mornings I didn't even believe the words I was saying, but I did it anyway, because I realized surrender was the greatest tool that I had. And it just feels like this huge relief, like truly like lifting a physical burden. And it became a 24-hour game for me. I didn't have to have a plan. I didn't have to know what was going to happen 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years down the road, because he had me for today. And that was enough.
Absolutely. And I feel like you even writing down those things that you wanted to control. I mean, I even think about times in my life where there are things that I wanted to control, but they were more subconscious. And I don't think about it until I kind of peel back the layers and go, oh, like I'm actually trying to hang tight to this thing that I just don't even truly
Yeah.
have a grip on. You also mentioned a C.S. Lewis quote, and I thought that this was a really interesting way to talk about sorrow and lifting, you know, the feeling of that. You say the acceptance that grief is something so out of my human control removed a barrier. It restored memory and love and life. Can you be a little bit more specific about the restoration part of that and how that has shown through your life, even most recently of writing this book?
Yeah, that is probably my favorite quote from that book. I like, actually, my editors at some point was like, can we quote someone besides C.S. Lewis? Or like, and I was like, why? Is there someone better than C.S. Lewis? That's my favorite quote from it, because I felt that in a really poignant way. I think probably 3 to 4 months after Ben passed, and for whatever reason, I think just the trauma, like neurological trauma of being with him with the accident when he died and everything, sort of like locked up my memory in some way. And I just, for those months, I had such a hard time remembering things about him and about us and things that we did. And I was very frustrated about that. And I think there was a point where it took a lot of therapy and like trauma work, which definitely I think unlocked those memories. But I think that I was trying to hold on so tight, but there was a series of just one thing after the other that I had to give up. You know, I had to give up. I didn't have to, but I eventually gave up our home. And then I eventually had to give up and sort of surrender and lay down these dreams for a family or children or even trips or things that we had planned. And so I think the tendency, or at least my tendency at the beginning, was to hold as tight as I could to everything, you know, to keep everything the same and keep everything preserved. And because I was afraid that if I did start to heal and move forward, that I would forget him and forget parts of our marriage. And, you know, I just didn't want to lose that. And so I think there's this really hard tension in grief of how do I preserve and include and sort of graft this person or these memories or these things into my life as I move forward and remember them, but also, you know, not be fearful that I can do new things. I can put some of the clothes away. You know, I can move into a new home, which I did. And so I think when I finally quit trying to preserve our life and hold so tight to it, and again, just said, you know what, today I'm going to take one small step forward. And if there's an opportunity to share a story or wear his flannel or, you know, hang out with one of his friends, like I'll do that. But you really can start to live a new life and honor the old one at the same time. And I think that's sort of what he was getting at, or what I heard when I read that lifting of the sorrow almost brings back memory, and it gives you a clearer, sweeter, like better picture of the person, because you're not trying so hard not to lose it. You're just like letting the parts of them that you love kind of naturally flow out of the new life that you're living. And I now feel like I feel like he's just like a best friend that is so with me. And it's not because I'm trying, you know, I'm not white knuckling our memories. It's just, you know, they're forever there. And as soon as I, again, sort of try to like quit trying to do it my own way, he just becomes naturally a part of the new things I'm doing in my life.
So some of those new things, is there anything that he really enjoyed doing that you've adapted into your life now that you do to remember him?
Definitely. And I would say to anyone, like a practical takeaway, that was huge in my grieving process. And, you know, he was a big hunter. So I've definitely done that a few times with my brother-in-law, and that's really special. But, you know, for me, rather than actually hunting, it's just being outdoors. And like, that's where I go on my worst days to really even commune with the Lord, because Ben saw God so much in nature. And that's a lot of where his heart was, and where his joy came from. And so that was huge for me. And honestly, I started playing golf 2 years ago. He was a great golfer. And we never played together because it was like guy time. But, you know, I'm like, I love sports. I love games. I love outdoors. And so I gave it a shot. And it's sort of my little Ben thing that I do now. And I'm not very good, but it, you know, it always makes me feel like I'm still kind of carrying out something that he enjoyed doing, and it's special.
Yeah. And it's for fun. You know, you don't feel like you have to be like an expert at it. It's just something to try that's new for you, and then also to remember him. I loved your chapter when you were talking about how you took time to study heaven And as someone that like grew up in the church and then Christian school and everything, constantly hearing stories about heaven. And I mean, I'm going to admit, like, there have been times where it's like heaven sometimes is this concept that it's so far from what we know, obviously, because we're here on earth. But what about studying heaven and studying where and what he is living now with Jesus? Like, I don't know, like enhanced your faith and gave you a peace of mind about the afterlife, you know?
Yeah, it was definitely that peace of mind. And I don't remember honestly what sparked. I think someone gave me a book that a local pastor had written after losing his like 18 or 19-year-old son. And he spoke a lot about his son being in heaven and that bringing relief and solace to them. And so I think that may have been what sparked it. But honestly, it was the greatest like gift I could have given myself, because I think so much of the grief and so much of the sorrow and so much of the day-to-day struggles and prayers and you know, mountains that we sort of have to climb are all about me. You know, they were all about how am I feeling? What do I need from God? What do I need to do today? And I think redirecting my gaze from everything that I had lost and putting it on everything that Ben had gained was it was the most powerful thing to pull me out on the darkest days, because it's just what I've told people. If you really love this person as much as you claim to, you can't be anything but joyful for where he is. And for me, learning biblically more what that looked like, it just started to paint this picture for me of, okay, the person that I love more than anyone in the world is getting to have the absolute best experience we can't even imagine right now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad for him. Like I truly, it helped me get to a point where I was glad enough for him that I could deal with how it was hurting me, because like I wanted him to be there, you know, like I wanted him to be here with me, but I'm so pumped for him. I wouldn't bring him back, you know? And so some of those books gave me, you know, a sound theological picture of what that looked like. And that just helped sturdy, you know, my faith and my understanding, and not just kind of wishful thinking of, oh, he's like not in pain anymore, which obviously he's not, but just like reading passages that imply like that heaven, it just extrapolates the things that we loved here into an even better, even bigger experience. So, you know, that was so beautiful for me. And even today, I just smile thinking about it, because yeah, like he won the lottery. Good for you. It's painful for me down here, but to remember that, it pulled me out of the pit on really the worst days.
And you often talk about his zeal for life and having this joy. And I feel like that directly links, obviously, to where he is now, and just being in a place of that you're going to be someday, you know? There's a quote that you mentioned about being in the midst of God's glorious creation. Never for a minute believe the lie that he's left you, meaning God. He is right beside you, ready and waiting for you to ask him for what you need and to meet you with light and warmth right in the middle of his glorious creation. Is there anything specific that you remember, any, you know, moment where you feel like God really met you where you were? Whether you're having a good day or whether it was that low valley of a day where you needed to be pulled out of that feeling?
No, definitely. All of the above. I think that specific instance was one of the hunting experiences. But I remember sitting, looking at the beach in Florida. I think it was I imagine it was Christmas after he passed. My parents have a place in Florida. And so that's actually where we were when Ben had his accident and when he died. And so the following Christmas, we were back down there, and honestly was nervous about it. I mean, it's a place that we've gone for years and years and years. So it wasn't necessarily a Ben and me place, but it is our family place, and just knew it would be triggering. But I was sitting looking at the ocean and just like watching the waves crash and thinking about just how powerful God is, that this ocean works the way it works, and the tides come in so faithfully morning and evening, and just seeing sort of the grand nature of it in this place that was really vulnerable for me. And I just remember him just saying so clearly, like, if I'm this powerful and intentional with the ocean, like how much more powerful and intentional am I with you? Just trust me. And I think that was such a profound moment. And then from there, that sort of like changed my vision in the way that I even notice things outside. Like I remember walking one time too out around a pond, and walking is definitely, it's a cathartic, like prayerful place for me. Excuse me. And seeing flowers like right at the end of kind of February, beginning of springtime, and, you know, knowing they were about to bloom because it's spring, but they still looked dead, and thinking, you know, we can't all be in a flowering season. Like if we were in a flowering season all the time, we wouldn't make it. There's a reason that they have to go dormant. There's a reason they have to wilt. There's a reason they have to rest. But like spring always follows winter. And that was just a reminder too. Like it's okay that I'm in a dormant winter season. And another physical reminder, I'm not going to stay here. My story doesn't end here, because he's intentional with creation, and life always comes after dormancy, and life always comes after death. And that can be true of me too. Yeah.
And just creating this sense of newness in a different way for yourself. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people reading this book that are going to find new seasons in their own life, and find new ways to face what's going on. So Lemons on Friday, love that title so much. How did you come up with this comparison of lemonade out of lemons, and then Christ coming to save us all, giving himself up, and then coming back to life? Like, how did you put the two and two together? It's brilliant.
Well, I mean, you know, the lemonade out of lemons, we've all heard that saying, obviously. And I don't truly remember at what point that came in my head, but I remember feeling like this isn't something I can ever make good out of. It was sort of the surrender thing again. And from the beginning, that was always my prayer to God. It was like, I will do this. I mean, not that I had a choice, I couldn't change it, but I can walk through this with you if there's purpose for my pain. Like the only thing I couldn't imagine was it feeling like this pain or this loss was wasted. And so that's sort of where that came from. And I knew I couldn't do anything to make it purposeful, right? So he was going to have to take something sour and bitter and awful and make it sweet. And I knew he could do that. But where the Friday thing came in was me being very honest about the fact that my life felt more like the panic and despair and questions and tears that would have accompanied Crucifixion Friday than it did Resurrection Sunday. And like knowing as a believer, you know, Ben's death, our marriage, my pain, my life, just as someone who lives in a broken world, will eventually be made completely sweet. Like he'll wipe every tear. There will be no pain, suffering, mourning. But when most of our days feel like the disciples probably felt scared and abandoned and unsure on Crucifixion Friday, how do we live with lemons on Friday, knowing that Sunday's coming and holding tight to that hope, but also not being unrealistic about how painful it is right here? Yeah.
I completely agree. I remember there was something that an artist told me one time when I was interviewing them about kind of a similar conversation topic about hope and how it's a choice.
Yeah.
We have to choose it daily, not knowing when it's going to come, but just knowing that it's going to be the epilogue. It's going to be the end story. I've really enjoyed this. I mean, it was such an easy and relatable read. And that's something that I think anybody, even if they're not going through loss, they're going to read this and think, wow, this is how I want to approach life and how God has directed us. And I feel like this world right now really needs to see what it feels like, to hear what it feels like to look to him for everything. So,
well, you said hope is a choice. I mean, that truly is, that is the point, is you have an option every day to either fix your eyes on everything that's wrong, or you have a chance to say, you know what, all of this pain is real, but God's promises are real, and what he can supply me today is real. And the hope is real, even if I can't really see it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about your new book, Lemons on Friday, out November 16th. Mattie Jackson Selecman, always love chatting with you. You're so fun.
Thank you. I'm so glad we did it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
It's the Libby Show. The Libby Show. It's the Libby Show. It's the Libby Show.